Before Metallica went mainstream, one thrash metal band was already tackling real-world issues and reshaping the genre. In 1989, Testament's Practice What You Preach changed the game. Here's how they beat the Black Album to the punch. Let me first start by giving you some context. Testament is one of the most popular and influential bands in the thrash metal scene. They're not part of the big four, who are known as Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, and Anthrax, but people have always said, what if there was a big five or a big six? Who do you add? And one of the most common responses would be Testament. So let's just say they are one of the biggest thrash metal bands out there. The band formed in the San Francisco Bay Area in 1983, but their original name was Legacy, which would later be the name of their debut album. The band was formed by guitarist Eric Peterson and another guitarist who happened to be his cousin, Derek Ramirez. They later hired a drummer named Louis Clemente, and the original vocalist was not who you would expect it to be. It was Steve Salsa, who would later play in Exodus. After that, they found a bass player named Greg Christian, and this band played alongside other thrash bands that were out at the time, such as Exodus, Slayer, and Anthrax, and they had some lineup changes. Louis Clemente left the band, but he would later rejoin. Derek Ramirez was replaced by Alex Skolnick, who was only a teenager at the time and also a student of Joe Satriani. So he took the band's musicianship up a notch. And then Steve Salsa left the band to join Exodus, and Chuck Billy became the new vocalist. The band then changed their name to Testament and released their first album called Legacy, which was the original name of the band. That album was released in April of 1987 on Megaforce Records. A year later, they released The New Order in May of 1988. The band was becoming popular, and they had a few videos played on MTV's Headbangers Ball. During this time, thrash metal was starting to become more popular, and its sound was starting to evolve. Back in 1983, when Metallica released their debut album, Kill 'Em All, the genre was more underground, but then it started to get more exposure. MTV started playing music videos on Saturday nights on their show, The Headbangers Ball. Then you had the first subgenres of thrash with crossover thrash, led by bands such as Suicidal Tendencies and DRI. Thrash metal was no longer just about occult themes, the devil, or how meta you are. Bands started writing about more real-world topics. Metallica wrote about substance abuse on their album Master of Puppets, and corruption on their album And Justice for All. Slayer were writing songs about the Antichrist and what happens when you go to hell, but even Slayer decided to shift their music and lyrics with 1988's South of Heaven. So now it was time for Testament to shift their lyrical themes from the dark and the occult to more real-world topics. Their third studio album was called Practice What You Preach, and it was released on August 8th, 1989. It's celebrating 35 years. They started to change their sound in this album, both musically and lyrically. Musically, they were bringing in influences from genres such as traditional heavy metal, jazz fusion, and progressive and technical metal. Lyrically, they were writing more about politics and society. Now, of course, when the band changes their style, some fans are going to hate it, but that's inevitable. Take a look at Metallica. They get criticized all the time for the Black Album, but it's also their best-selling heavy metal album of all time. But back to Testament, they decided to write about real-world topics. For example, the songs Practice What You Preach and Blessed in Contempt were about religion. Sins of Omission were about ending your life, and the ballad was about self-forgiveness. Let me dive deeper into the album's lyrics. The album opens with the title track called Practice What You Preach, and the song basically tells you what it's about in the song title, but the main target of the song were televangelists, who were very common in the late 80s and often the target of metal bands. The song Perilous Nation was about censorship, another hot topic in the metal scene. Now, the band did not completely abandon the occult themes. The album has a song called Envy Life, which is about black magic, but it's done more as a cautionary tale. Another big topic in metal was corruption, and this was depicted in the song Time Is Coming. The lyrics mention about how the president is a man and they most resent, and how they know him through the government, and how he taxes and spends your money. Blessed in Contempt is another song that's very critical of religion. Then there was their big environmentally conscious song, Greenhouse Effect, which is about the destruction of the rainforest in South America. So yeah, Testament were writing about songs about saving the planet. long before bands like Gojira were doing it. Then there was the anti-suicide song that I mentioned before called Sins of Omission, as well as the aforementioned ballad, a song about forgiving yourself about the mistakes you made and not giving up on life. And the last song is Nightmare Coming Back to You, which is about feeling trapped and unable to escape difficult circumstances. Let's talk more about the music. Now, the reason you clicked on this video was because you saw the title and I was claiming this was the original Black Album. So for the purposes of this video, I will define a Black Album as when a thrash band changes their sound and releases an album to be more accessible to the masses. So I believe Testament did just that. Now you may be thinking, well, this is not their Black Album. You're thinking of The Ritual, which came out in 1992 after Metallica's Black Album. Well, yeah, that's true. But I believe this album, Practice What You Preach, was ahead of its time. Practice What You Preach features better songwriting. The guitar riffs were memorable. The songs were filled with melodic hooks. Then there was the bass guitar. And this was not Injustice for All. This album had the bass guitar in the forefront. The bass player on this album was Greg Christian, and he is one of the best bass players in metal. Not everything has to move at breakneck speed. There were lots of mid-tempo songs and riffs. But it was now time to evolve past the full-speed thrash of albums like Slayer's Rain and Blood. The songs are catchy. Some of these choruses stick in your head, such as the chorus for the song Time Is Coming. I know some people hate this album and call it a sellout. I hear a lot of metal elitists say the same thing about this band that they do about Metallica. But the truth is, you cannot deny Metallica's influence on this band. Just listen to the song Envy Life and you will hear the influence. Then there is the ballad. Now we all know this is not the first time a thrash band tried to do a ballad. Metallica did it back in 1984 with Fade to Black. But this song brought another level of musicianship to the band. Alex Skolnick was a talented guitarist, and his acoustic intro in the ballad showed the world that a metal ballad was more than just writing a love song while strumming 3 chords on an acoustic guitar. Then there were the vocals of Chuck Billy. He added a lot more melody to the songs. It was not just traditional thrash metal vocals. He was now trying to sing parts of the songs. This band's lineup also had a very talented guitar duo of Alex Skolnick and Eric Peterson. Songs may have been stripped down and melodic, but there were also lots of technical guitar riffs and blazing solos. Then there's the production. The sound is much clearer. You can hear the bass, as I mentioned before, and the drums and the guitar are right in the front of the mix, and the vocals are very clear. You can listen to the lyrics and you know exactly what Chuck Billy is saying. So for that reason, many of these songs get stuck in your head. So now, what do I think? Is this the original Black Album? Well, I would say kind of. They were doing it before many of the other bands. A lot of other bands would be doing it in the 90s, but I think they were able to find a balance where they didn't lose their technicality or heaviness, but at the same time they brought more melody and catchiness to their songs. Now personally, I think this is my favorite album by Testament. It was a major part of my musical journey. It was around the time when I started listening to heavier music. I was listening to a lot of the glam bands back then, Bon Jovi, Poison, Warrant, and all those bands, but I also like thrash, like the Big Four bands. But the only other non-Big Four thrash bands I was listening to at that time were Testament and Exodus. I was at a point in my life where I was not ready for the extreme stuff yet, like Creator or Sodom, which I listen to now. I was listening to more accessible music, and I think for that reason, this album remains one of my favorites. So what do you think? Is this the original Black Album, or is it one of the first albums where bands started to soften their sound? What are some other Black albums you can think of? Let us know in the comments. In the meantime, check out this other review I did for Testament, The Gathering. It's a completely different type of album. I'll stick that right there. Thanks for watching. Please like this video. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe if you're not already. I do rock and metal reviews, rankings, and more. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.